there. Okay, we are going to talk about Fullmetal Alchemist. Published in Monthly Shonen Gangan by mangaka Hiromu Arakawa, Fullmetal Alchemist is a shonen manga that debuted in 2001 and ran until 2010. It was a huge success, selling over 50 million copies by the end of its run, and was adapted into two anime, Fullmetal Alchemist in 2003, which diverted from the source material as the manga had yet to be completed, and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, a 2009 anime that was a much more faithful adaptation of the manga. It's one of those animes that was able to gain huge popularity in the West and remains highly influential and iconic to this day, despite me being horrified at the idea that some anime fans were not even born before the series came out. I would love to tell you that I adore Fullmetal Alchemist, that it's an anime I look back on so fondly, and that I was overjoyed to see Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood bring a faithful adaptation of the series to our BitTorrent webpage. I mean, legally viewed anime web pages. But as I get older and more disenfranchised with society, more left behind by the system, and more left in general, Fullmetal Alchemist starts to show key problems in its themes and narrative, especially in regards to the political and military themes and narratives. And this seems my vegetables. Not because there's anything inherently wrong or flawed in Fullmetal Alchemist's overall storytelling, but because its political and military themes are a strong reflection of our current society at large. That's right, my dudes. This is my hot take on your favorite baby anime, Fullmetal Alchemist. So, before we dig deeper, I do have a couple disclaimers here I want to make. First off, we are spoiling all of Fullmetal Alchemist, so if you've not watched this anime and you don't want to be spoiled, this might be a video you watch later. This video is only covering Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood and the manga. I am a simple bitch with simple needs. I do not have the energy to argue which of the anime series is better, and besides, there are a million other YouTube videos out there that will do this for you and confirm your bias. In terms of actual content warnings, I do go into depth about fictional ethnic cleansing and war crimes against a fictional marginalized people, and while not as graphic, I will be touching on actual historical instances of ethnic cleansing, police brutality, and war crimes on marginalized people from actual historical events, so please be mindful of that going in. Finally, and this is a lot more superficial, I do really enjoy Fullmetal Alchemist. It took over a good chunk of my life back in 2003. I have a lot of fanfics and fan art lost to the sands of time in regards to this, and I say this because I really want to make this clear. This is not some everything wrong with Fullmetal Alchemist. Fullmetal Alchemist is canceled video. Roy Mustang is make-believe. He is a fictional cartoon character. He isn't real. He cannot be canceled. I personally feel that even things you love can be looked at or criticized or held under scrutiny. And if we want our art forms that we love to be taken seriously as pieces of media, we have to be able to withstand or accept that there is going to be criticism of it, even from people who really do appreciate what these pieces of art have to offer. So if you have a character I bring up in this video who you identify with or see as your comfort character, please keep that in mind. And if you are not in a place where you want to hear me state that your comfort character did a war crime, then maybe this is not a video you should be watching. Okay, here we go. Fullmetal Alchemist is the story of two brothers, Ed and Alphonse Elric, who, after a disastrous attempt at forbidden alchemy that leaves Ed missing two of his limbs and Al having his soul infused into a suit of armor, resolve to restore their bodies. Fullmetal Alchemist takes place in a fictional world modeled after the Industrial Revolution, with the primary story taking place in the European-inspired country of Amestris, a military-run country. This will be important later. Alchemy is the leading form of science used in this world. While alchemy is conveyed as science in the show, it's easy to compare it to hard fantasy, which is defined by John Clute and John Grant as magic, regarded as an almost scientific force of nature and subject to the same rules and principles. The most prevalent rule of this world's alchemy, that is also a core theme in the show, is the rule of equivalent exchange, i.e. the conservation of mass, i.e. you can't get something for nothing. The majority of alchemy is done by using a transmutation circle, with a few exceptions. The study of alchemy itself is considered prestigious, and many alchemists join the state military for higher levels of privilege and access to more alchemy studies. Service equals citizenship.
I'm doing my part!
A huge key theme in the series is Ed and Al sticking to their proverbial guns by attempting to regain their body parts without compromising their morals or convictions while they navigate the complex world of the military and the fellow alchemists who inhabit it. A goal that proves challenging as the two go deeper and deeper into the military and discover not just the horrific secrets hidden by the state, but also how far some individuals will go in pursuit of their goals, regardless of the cost of human life. This goal leads them to run headfirst into my murderous Bara Husbando Scar, a mysterious man of no known name, an arm with a tattoo that allows him to create the destruction step of alchemy, allowing him to destroy literally anything he touches. He is introduced as a man whose goal is to eradicate all state alchemists and kills the only joke Fullmetal Alchemist fans can make. But by focusing on this, we are bearing the lead, and the poor child fused of her dog that Scar put out of their misery. See, Scar is an Ishvalan refugee, a group of people whose lands have been annexed by a mistress and were residing in a small region of the country's southeast. Prior to the events of the series, the majority of Ishvalans were exterminated during what a mistress calls the Ishval Civil War, and what most likely everyone who is not a mistress calls the Ishvalan War of Extermination. And this, my dudes, is where Fullmetal Alchemist becomes complicated. The idea of fantasy or science fiction shows having a fictional race or even a species be a stand-in for real-life marginalized groups is nothing new to these genres. From the elves of Dragon Age to the elves of Witcher to the orcs of Orc Cop. This is a pretty common trope.
Have you tried not being a mutant?
Sadly, there's a lot of flaws in this. The fantasy creature is an allegory for a trans person. Storytelling. Zootopia talks about tolerance and living together with carnivores, but at the end of the day, the carnivores in Zootopia are dangerous, where a trans person just is not. We might see ourselves as progressive people who would never push for an ethno-state, but when it's those dirty, holier-than-thou terrorist elves in The Witcher, well, it's not like they're real people.
The other races and humans are much more likely to succeed in living in peace, but the elves have got to go. Elves have got to go.
Fantasy stories also enjoyed the plot of the marginalized group who of course had every right to want freedom from oppression. But there's always a few bad apples who just took it too far. Those people who fought and demanded for equality the wrong way, as opposed to asking their oppressors nicely if they could have some rights, please. Scar works because the Ishvalans are not magical elves or faunus, they're humans, whose difference in skin and eye color are more to ID them as other, compared to the white and often blonde-haired and blue-eyed people of Amestris, than to portray them as fictional beings. With their dark skin, conservative religion, and desert homeland, it's not uncommon to view them as an analogy to various tribes of the Middle East who have faced horrific casualties and oppression due to the United States' invasion of both Afghanistan and Iraq. With the original Fullmetal Alchemist airing in 2003, it wouldn't have been unfounded to assume that the Ishval Civil War was a direct allegory to the Iraq War, a war that led to the death of over 200,000 Iraqi civilians, including multiple instances of massacres of children and even the rape and murder of entire families. However, according to Hiromu Arakawa, her inspiration for the Ishval's oppression and genocide came a lot closer from home. Arakawa, in a January 2006 New Type USA interview, said her inspiration came from the Ainu. The Ainu are an ethnic group residing in Hokkaido, the island furthest north of Japan, who had their land stolen and were displaced by the Japanese, many who Arakawa says were her ancestors. Along with their lands annexed from them, the Ainu were also forced to adapt Japanese names, learn the Japanese language, and cease many of their traditions and customs. The Ainu were not recognized as a people by Japan until 2008. And to this day, many people living in Hokkaido have all but lost their heritage, victims of a cultural genocide with only an estimated 100 people who still speak the language. Making the Ishvals human and basing their genocide on actual historical events allows for Scar to be a sympathetic and well-rounded character. He isn't a radical who took things too far. He is a survivor of a literal genocide who is on a quest for vengeance because literally everything he has been taken from him. His land, his family, his fucking arm. There's a reason we never learned Scar's name, and that is because Scar considers the person he used to be just as dead as the rest of his people. Scar is a man of so much trauma, he has taken it upon himself to murder every state alchemist he comes across. Not in some misguided attempt to liberate his people, but because it's the only thing he has the power to do. From a very simple perspective, there are two big themes that Fullmetal Alchemist is about. The first is staying true to yourself and not compromising your morals to reach your goals. We talked about this earlier. And the second is about ending cycles of hate. Both of these are pretty common themes you'll see in your favorite baby anime, but Fullmetal Alchemist really excels at storytelling. The first chapter that introduces Scar is a great example of this. When I reread it, I was really impressed with how well this chapter establishes who Scar is, the bond the Elric brothers have for each other, the limitations of skilled alchemist Cornel Roy Mustang's alchemy skills, and the dynamic he has with the team who is loyal to him but are not afraid to be empowered. The themes of ending the cycle of hate is not so much built into characters monologuing or proclaiming violence as a cycle. Okay, a little, but it's shonen anime. Saying the morals and themes out loud is as shonen a trope as making friends with the guy's ass you just kicked, but is woven into the story's narrative. The genocide committed in the Ishvalan Civil War was horrific, and in return led to Scar, who was in a bout of rage and grief, kill the parents of Ed and Al's childhood friend Winry Rockbell, which in return led to Winry wanting to kill Scar. Violence is a cycle, and the struggle and courage to break that cycle is one of the key themes in the show. What I appreciate is it's not just one character who makes that choice, it's multiple people. From Winry saying while she won't forgive Scar for his actions, it wouldn't be fair to the memory of her doctor parents to take revenge, to other Ishvalans telling Scar that despite what happened to them, the cycle of violence needs to stop, to Roy refusing to kill the shape-shifting homunculus Envy, despite learning that Envy killed one of his closest friends, to Scar himself agreeing to put aside his quest for vengeance and ally with Ed and the rest of his comrades to stop the corruption that led to the genocide of his people in the first place. Envy, one of the main antagonists in the show, literally gets so mad that everyone vows to end the cycle of violence, he dies out of spite. It kind of rules. I'm sure by now I've had multiple people leave me angry comments saying that Fullmetal Alchemist is not a baby anime because there's violence and body horror and that whole overarching plot point where your favorite character did the war crimes. But in terms of children and young adult media versus media for adults, I'd argue the big difference is not content, but context. Wow, I sounded so smart there. Okay, I'll elaborate. I feel that with the former, it's not unprecedented to address themes of colonization, abuse, or unhealthy relationships. What I'd argue sets children's media apart from adult media is that children's media usually has a very clear and direct message or moral in regards to these heavy themes. The best example I can make here is children's show on Cartoon Network Steven Universe and adult show on HBO Succession. The themes of both shows, when you boil them down to their cores, are toxic families. But while Steven Universe very clearly and literally states its themes, such as the importance of a loving and accepting family, found or otherwise, and even has the fantasy at the end that even the most controlling and conservative family can come to love and accept you, Succession never states what a good family should be, and instead its plot focuses more on the actions done by both the portrayers and victims of a toxic family. And I don't think telling a younger audience things like friends love each other for who they are is bad, or that shows these clear-cut messages are bad. These are good messages, and they're important messages for children to hear. They can even be affirming messages for adults who might have dealt with their own unhappy childhoods to hear as well. Details in Fullmetal Alchemist like Scar ending his cycle of hate and destruction and very symbolically getting a new tattoo that allows for reconstruction is straightforward, but for a younger audience learning to critically interpret media and learn themes and symbolism, this works very well. A lot of the show works very well. And I'm saying this because I'm about to knock down this Fullmetal Alchemist House of Cards with what my biggest problem in the story is. At the end of Fullmetal Alchemist, Scar is rescued by gatekeep gaslight girl boss herself, Major General Olivia Armstrong, and is essentially given amnesty in return for him helping rebuild Ishval. And objectively, this sounds good. So what's the problem? Here's where we go deeper. Dylan Rodriguez, in a series of articles on police abolition distributed by the Medium publication Level, said the following. To reform a system is to adjust isolated aspects of its operation in order to protect that system from total collapse, whether by internal or external forces. Such adjustments usually rest on the fundamental assumption that these systems must remain intact, even as they consistently produce asymmetrical misery, suffering, premature death, and violent life conditions for certain people and places. And here's the nitty-gritty of the show, where the show, with its incredibly strong themes and strong world building, just kind of ignores its own world. Yes, Amestris is a military country that annexed an entire race of people and genocided the majority of its population to make a magic rock, but Fullmetal Alchemist's conclusion to all that is the state is perfectly fine. The literal military state did nothing wrong. An unknown soldier didn't accidentally kill a child that led to the Ishval Civil War. It was the evil envy pretending to be a soldier. Amestris isn't a corrupt military state seeking to colonize various regions for resources. It's being manipulated behind the scenes by centuries-old homunculus who needs lots of dead bodies to make evil alchemy. Strict but objectively fair, and good people in charge would never agree to this. Not to mention, the reason behind the genocide is a huge issue unto itself. Genocide is a horrific act, but it starts because of fear-mongering, perceived ownership of land, ethnic and cultural differences. To boil it down to genocide happened to make evil magic rock is oversimplifying at best and naive at worst. And in 2001, where the biggest pushback to cries against horrific acts done by those in power boils down to, it's just some bad apples. We don't need to abolish the police. You need the police. Who else would disregard a serial killer because they were targeting a marginalized community, if not for the police? Yes, maybe there was one bad policeman, but he's in jail now. There, that makes it fine. That makes it completely fine. It's an uncomfortable theme in a show that objectively appears to be compassionate and progressive. This also absolves so many characters of horrific deeds. Every middle schooler's anime crush, Roy Mustang, did so many war crimes, and his way to make amends is to say, well, when I'm in charge, this won't happen anymore. Fullmetal Alchemist, for all its good themes of ending cycles of violence and having conviction in reaching your goals without compromising your morals, has no interest in taking apart these awful state military systems. Or at least it has no interest with its characters who are funny comic relief. He's so wacky and funny. Oh shit. Or characters who you can buy little UFO catchers of. The irony is that character Dr. Tim Marco, a man who is complacent in horrific war crimes, actually does have a full arc in regard to his actions. He's discovered as a man utterly broken and wrecked by what he did, and as opposed to the other characters, which boil down to, well, you were sad about it, so it's okay. Marco is actually forced to face the consequences for what he's done, pay an actual price for it, and is able to redeem himself. From a storytelling perspective, I think it's a total cop-out to have a character essentially say they're sorry and die. And Marco coming to terms with what he's done and making amends for it is one of the most underappreciated character arcs in Fullmetal Alchemist. But Marco is a side character and wouldn't look too good on a body pillow, versus Roy Mustang, who was voted the second most popular character in the 2016 Crunchyroll Fullmetal Alchemist poll. Yay! So we can't exactly have him directly admit he did all the war crimes. Fullmetal Alchemist puts a generous amount of time into humanizing Roy and the rest of his team who are complacent in the Ishval Civil War, making them into fully realized and likable characters. Arakawa is constantly showing us that these are objectively good people who did a bad thing. There's a reason Crimson Alchemist Kimberly rolls up as a sadistic and cruel murderer in the flashbacks of the war. He's treated both by the narrative and by the characters themselves as an anomaly, a way for you to all jump in my mentions and go, well, Roy wasn't as bad as Kimberly, because Kimberly is so cartoonishly evil, a bad apple, if you would. Roy, Hughes, Hawkeye, and Armstrong, on the other hand, are good apples, and should not be judged so harshly because they have regrets about their actions. But all this further emphasizes that Roy has no desire to dismantle the system, just to run it. It's literally his entire focus throughout the series. We can have him feel sad that he did all the war crimes, but he makes no true amends for it. Put a pin in that. We're getting back to that, I promise. And his entire goal as a character is that he is sad that the system made him do war crimes, but all that will change when he is in charge of the exact same system. There's also something jarring about how, despite overthrowing an evil that has existed for centuries, Ed and Al have no interest in what the future holds for Amestris and decide to fucking peace out and study more alchemy. Like, I get after so much trauma, maybe Ed just wants to live a normie-ass life researching cool shit and having some babies with his childhood friends. Does the Western mark effect just not exist in anime? But him and Ed state their goal in studying more alchemy is to prevent what happened to poor Nina Tucker from ever happening again. But what happened to Nina was not the product of limited alchemy knowledge, it was the product of selfish and corrupt human nature. And it goes back into my problem that the show believes that the system is perfectly fine with good people in charge. And with the power of science, there will be no more sickos who make dumb-to-death memes. Other thing, Scar fucking left to rebuild Ishval the worst person possible. Like fucking Miles. He's like 1/8 Ishval. Oh, I'm gonna change the system from within. like Roy does, but you can barely understand what he is saying because his mouth is constantly full of a mistress boot. Him and his white-ass name and respectability politics head off to Ishval like homeboy is going on Birthright. Oh, I don't really have an opinion about a mistress' occupation of Ishval. I just came here to ride a camel. Oh, and Roy. I see you all typing comments and saying that being in my house for a year with minimal social interactions outside of asking guests at my job to please keep their masks on has rotted my brain. I see you all typing and saying, Emma, earlier you said Roy doesn't want to make amends for his war crimes, but isn't helping rebuild Ishval making amends? But according to the Fullmetal Alchemist Wikipedia, Fullmetalpedia, wait, that's not what it's called. Well, it should be. Anyway, according to Fullmetalpedia, it literally says at the end of the series, ya boy Mustang is rebuilding Ishval and turning it into a trade point between Amestris and other countries. Roy is doing the shock doctrine. You know, the shit the US just does, where it just barges into another country after a huge national crisis, like a disaster or an upheaval, like it's a fucking Kool-Aid Man or a corporation at Pride Month, and just starts to implement its own rule and often controversial policies while a country is too in shock to properly push back or resist. The best examples of these would be the 1973 coup of Chile, who was backed by a group of neoliberal Chilean economics who had studied neoliberalism at the Chicago School of Economics, and the Iraq War, which, according to the author of the book Shock Doctrine, Naomi Klein, is the largest full-scale shock doctrine ever attempted. On a side note, if you do want to learn more about the atrocities of the Iraq War with less anime references, go check out Blowback Pod. Brendan is very cool. He let me use his music for a video once. I hope I made it clear there's a lot of Fullmetal Alchemist I really love. But as I get older, the more and more pushback I see to actual substantial change that could make the world better. I saw a lot of rejoicing when Biden won the 2020 election, but as Biden fails to offer universal health care, cancel student debt, and continues mass deportations and incarceration of undocumented immigrants, many of them children, I become more frustrated at the notion that the system is perfectly fine and it just needs good people to be overseeing it. And now that the bad people who were overseeing it are gone, we can all breathe easy. And I try to be sympathetic to these viewpoints, like I'm an old bitch, and I honestly thought George W. Bush was evil incarnate, and that Obama being elected was going to usher in a new era of love and peace. Now I see people too young to remember and people who would just rather not remember thinking of him as a lovable doofus, not a man behind one of the worst war crimes of the 21st century. Listen to Blowback. So when I see people telling me to save my grumblings, would I rather have 4 more years of Trump? I just kind of get a feeling of despair. Do people do this in Fullmetal Alchemist? Gee, Scar? Do you want 4 more years of Kimberly? There will always be debate and discourse among how to make the world a better place. Plenty of people don't believe that we need to burn it all down in order to have a better world, and sincerely believe that through voting and protesting and holding our representatives into account, we can make things change for the better. Despite its solid world building, we are shown a very limited section of the world. Outside of learning that much of Amestris' expansion was a direct influence of Father, we are not given the elaborate history of Amestris and its government to really get a feel for if the system can be changed for the better from within, now that Father has been defeated. And while Fullmetal Alchemist seems to suggest otherwise, I keep recalling Audre Lorde. The Master's tools will not dismantle the Master's house. I know I'm putting a lot of pressure on the baby anime to take a stand against the powers that be and neoliberalism as a whole. And I know for sure I'm doing a lot of projecting with my own background and ideologies. But critical thinking is important. There's a lot to be said about not being complacent and asking yourself, what does the world need to fully change and to be a better place? And this does go hand in hand with the media we consume. So much media enforces the status quo, says the world is perfectly fine as long as good people are in charge, and portrays anyone who would try to dismantle it as a radical who took it too far. And I'm not saying any show that has these themes needs to be disregarded or have some evil neoliberal agenda. But we live in an age of manufactured consent, a world where we have been told that healthcare can't be free because that's what communists do, that the police officers are our friends, and that Israel has a right to displace an entire people and throw them into open-air prisons. Fullmetal Alchemist is a rare show that frankly addresses human rights atrocities and war crimes without making the oppressed sexy bunny men or whatever. And while I love that about the show, I do get a little disappointed that it was not able to take its themes just a little further and ask that we challenge not just the rules of the metaphysical, but the rules of our society as well. That's all for today. Thanks for letting me talk about Fullmetal Alchemist. I've really wanted to do this video for a while. Like I said, I got into Alchemist in 2003, so I've been grinding this axe about 17 years with it. I have some very exciting news. I am starting a Patreon, yay! So, like I said, if you like this stuff, please share my videos, subscribe to my videos. I am going to be doing affordable rates, so $2, and that will get you pretty much all those good Patreon things. You'll get your name in the credits, and you will get access to my videos earlier. Hooray! I don't know how much earlier. How much do y'all think? Call to action. Leave a comment and tell me how earlier my videos should be out. So, like I said, if you have the means, please share, subscribe. More call to action. Did you like Fullmetal Alchemist? What favorite character do you love who did all the war crimes? Leave a comment. Hit bells, sweetie. But thank you, like I said, so much for listening and making it through the video. I'm totally rambling, but like I said, y'all are the best. And thank you so much. All right, be good out there, everyone. Peace.